And so that Karen knows that I'm thinking about her. I said that just so she would hear it at the beginning. All right. Welcome. Oh, shoot.
Yeah. You're sitting there running your mouth. You
I
got
thought I
the
was all
paper
ready
done.
for everything. So John Muir, environmentalist supreme. I'm probably the person that most of us have heard of most of the time. Maybe Chardin. I know it's amazing what kind of shots you can get. I've seen all kinds of things on Zoom. Supreme environmentalist, huge example for all of us. I love the end of this chapter, so I want to start at the end. Just the last couple of paragraphs. John Muir is an icon for us today of love for the earth, a love that led him to prophetically speak and act for it. Like all great prophets, and I like that they're using him as that term prophet for him, as he was. Like all great prophets, he gave himself both to announcing what is true and denouncing what is false. He proclaimed the sacredness of the earth and condemned the sacrilege of the earth. He called on his readers to know the beauty of wilderness and warned them to protect that beauty. In all this, he invited his contemporaries to fall in love again and again with nature. And when you live in a city, you have to be reminded of that, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you get used to structures and you think that stuff, that's supreme, and we forget how beautiful just a little flower, even a weed can be. Right? And then the second part is really important, I think. Today, we hear many voices denouncing the abuse of the environment. These are important voices, and it is imperative that we listen to them and their dire predictions of the catastrophes we are bringing on ourselves and future generations by continuing to wrong the earth. But these voices are always most powerful when they prophetically combine their condemnation of wrong with a call to love, a passionate anger at what is being done to the environment coupled inseparably with a passionate love for the earth. We need both. We need to live and speak both. Muir says that deep within us is our primal love of the earth. This is the flame that will set us on fire, both to love and adore her and to cherish and honor her body. The challenge in environmental issues is it's really easy to yell at other people what they don't do. But our more important call, and I think what Muir called us into, is how do we not just condemn, but call people towards, right? Because I think if we just stop polluting, but not loving the earth, we haven't done much. I mean, it's good for us to stop polluting, don't get me wrong, but it's really that next step that we really need to get into. So what did you learn from John Muir? What stood out for you?
Well, every year he moved. The most important part to me was when he went with Roosevelt, went into Yosemite and spent some time in the national parks. And the result of that, the things that we have in place now. I thought that man was an environmentalist ahead of his time.
Well, the Sierra Club.
Yeah, I just thought that stood out to me, and his dad was a jerk and used to beat him.
Yeah.
You know, I was reading that in the first part of the chapter, but he overcame.
But he did it in a Christian sort of way. Sherry, how can you say that's bad? It's terrible, isn't it, that we have very often,
It's sad, it's sad.
it's sad, that's often been our
Be people
approach.
of the Lord, I'm supposed to love you, this is what we do, and that's exactly what we're saying.
Yeah, it's terrible. Huh?
I think there was a lot going on in the 1800s. There were always recognized as like some plants and animals. But I read about John Muir in the 60s. And, you know, it's like there was a book of his writings with a famous And it's just fascinating the things that he did. I was reading recently too, where there was this huge, wow, how the National Forest Service came about was when there was a huge forest fire in 1910 that went through Montana, Idaho, and
I own the property.
yeah, one of the states, you know, 3 states bigger than anything of the wildfire we had today. And it's, yeah, and it's when the Teddy Roosevelt, they put this out there and told people how the forest was burning, and people cared. That's the first time people started really caring about the trees, and that's when the National Forest Service, they made heroes out of these forest rangers who went there and fought these fires and died and really brought it under control eventually. And but that's how the Forest Service came about. I thought, I mean, so much happened in the 1800s for environmental stuff too.
And we forget how far we've come from then to now. What used to be very primitive and hard to get to, now sometimes we have roads very close to it. And so we have to live in a different type of relationship with all of the environment. That makes sense? Most rivers that they had to take account of because it was hard to cross them, today we cross them without even thinking it's a river. Right?
I can remember when they closed the Canyon Trail. You know, before that we could drive our cars all again.
Yeah.
And the difference within, I think it was probably a couple of years for that vegetation along the side of the road to come back.
Yeah.
But all that exhaust fumes had killed off a whole lot of stuff along that pathway.
Yeah.
And people were, there was an uproar about closing it. You know, people wanted to still drive up there and spread their suffering, but it was a life-saving thing for the canyon, I think, in the long term.
Well, what I don't understand is the last fire we had a couple of years ago, and you had this idiot that had that drone, and when they're trying to, that stuff that they, to prevent the fires, he had that drone up there interfering. This happened time after time after time, and you know what happened to him? Nothing.
Well,
And it's like, he interfered with someone trying to do their job. They should have gone after him. Don't tell me with technology, that he could have been tracked down and he should have been fined or put in jail, but you know. But those guys are up there, those people are up there doing the job, trying to save our forest, save our trees. Let's interfere in that. I mean, 3 different times the plane had to be brought down. I don't understand it.
Go ahead.
Well, I was lucky to take a class on John Muir when I was in college. And we went out to Mount Rainier and, we spent the night and we, studied him, and the teacher read from his book. But what was really great is he wanted us to be out in nature and not talk and not discuss John Muir, but just experience nature, which I thought was really great. It was a memorable class.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention the love for Emerson that you talked about. He said he described him as the most Sequoia-like soul. I love that.
Yeah.
His smile was sweet and calm as morning light on the mountains. And I felt here was a man I had been seeking, as sincere as the trees. And I just have to admire someone that influences all of us to see nature in ways that we might not have before. He had the eyes that opened all of ours to see the beauty of nature. And I was just at Chautauqua Institution and was able to go on a kayak and sailing on this lake, 17-mile lake. And oh my gosh, it was so glorious to be on the water after being here, you know? And just like putting my hand on the side and feeling the water, it's just not something we do very much here. And Mike said, well, we have a pool, like, can't really kayak in the pool, but, or sail. But, that, you know, just, my heart like blossomed being around the nature in Chautauqua. The maple trees and the oak trees, I gathered leaves and then pressing them and using them somehow, just like having those leaves around me. It just, makes my soul happy. And there, they talked about the idols of technology. And I thought, yay, because I'm not real good with technology. So, yeah, you know, we do idolize technology a lot, or society. And, it was so great to be around people who didn't. Because, you know, I think, the love of nature and the earth and beauty in that way is so much more conducive or healing or with for nature than technology.
So I think that's what he put in there, that people need to take the time.
Yeah,
That's
Take
right.
your time and go out into nature, recharge your battery.
right.
Because both of you have said those same type of words, spend time. And that's hard for us to remember to do, because if you have busy life, if you have full life, if you have, you know, long distance from nature life,
Yeah.
it's, you know, it has to be a very intentional practice. And that, but I think you can do it, but you've got to choose to.
Exactly.
Early in the morning.
It's very healing in the soul. I know when I lived in Kentucky, there's river forest we went to. And, you know, it's like, whenever something was troubling, I'd always go hiking. I can't hike anymore. But back in the day, I did a lot. Sometimes I still try to visualize those hikes and sitting places. Just trying to be mindful of the times that I really, and the times when I knew I'd be ill and stuff, where I could like look back and go and put myself in those places. So that I could heal myself, not just right then, but in the future.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's nothing to me. Well, when I was in my 20s and 30s, going to church meant going to woods.
I think Eeyore was in that same place. And one part of it, talk about how on Sundays, that's what he would do. That's how he did his Sabbath. And that goes against those of us who have decided that Sabbath means whatever it means. But that's how he spent his Sabbath, is in the woods.
One of the things that hit me, and it's related to all of this, is studies led him to two foundational realizations. He saw that everything is in flux and everything is interrelated. I was thinking about us not being able to get out and take long hikes. All it takes for me is sitting in my little sofa and looking out at a mesquite tree. I don't have to go for a long walk. I become one with the mesquite. It's alive. It's energy in that tree that's making it live. And that's the same energy that's in me.
And if you watch it long enough, it will move, maybe blown by the wind. Maybe gravity pulls the pods down, whatever it happens to be, but it changes. All right, and if you could watch it intently enough, you could watch the flower blossom. Most of us are not patient enough to take the time to actually do that, but we could.
I was looking at your photo up there in Machu Picchu.
Oh, her picture of me?
Yeah. She was on the top of that. I'm like, there he
Well,
is.
he's so insignificant, let's keep him that way.
There's another spot that I'm on the edge, and I spent an hour with my husband watching the sunset.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had.
I've been up there 3 times, and after my first time there, I realized I didn't need tours. I'm gonna be told, let's hear, I need to sit in this. Spend time.
But you can do that anywhere.
You can do that anywhere,
Go
but we have to choose to stop. And as we're much better at doing drones, so we get the best pictures, and, you know, and I'm not saying any of those are bad. But we substitute relative pass-throughs with sitting. I mean, you know, we forget that sitting and being in a place is really important.
For me, it's just turning off my brain,
Mhm.
quieting my mind and going into my soul, my body, and just being one with the universe. You have to work at it to do that.
We do.
You can't have people walking by and say hello. You can't really have a conversation with people if you want to get into that state of, for me, it's like prayer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like-
it is prayer.
Nature.
It is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with, some kids from the White Mountain Apache Reservation.
I was just there.
And I asked the girl once if she went, does she pray? And her response was all the time. And it really. Because, I mean, I didn't ask for more, but that's. You know, it was really very profound.
Well, it's what Judy said about prayer, when that was, whatever that was, children's time. To pray without ceasing is your breathing. You're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're breathing in, you're taking, breathing out, you're giving. And I think that that is part of nature too, that you are nature, and your breath is that life force. That you can see in everything. Photography I love because you can, if you can't walk it, at least you can look at a picture. Although I think looking on the window is better because it's live, you can see the prayer of the breath of the tree coming in and out.
But what a photograph is good for is what you were talking about, where you take it and that brings you back to that space of holiness where you can't go there because you can't always go, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to return back to that and in the space which is relatively urbanized or not naturalized, be able to return to that space. You don't want to only do that, but it's a way to be able to.
Do you think that's why people like cut flowers in a vase? Is that it's right there in front of you?
I think that's the same type of idea. You know, it's a relatively poor substitute, not that it's a bad substitute, but at least bring some of nature to us.
I buy flowers every week. Pardon? I buy flowers every week. $7 bunch, cheap as fries.
Fries.
You know,
And it'll last most of that week.
oh,
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
But just the colors, the smell, the sights, those are all things that can bring us back to, right? Especially because some of those things can be very foreign to our manufactured world. You know what I'm saying?
One of the things that I thought of is with, when John Muir was around and his thing with Teddy Roosevelt. It was, I mean, wasn't that the Industrial Revolution, like the 1850s?
Yeah, that's a
And technology.
Yeah.
And there was Muir who helped remind people, we can't just live as a material being, just wanting to take things from the earth. So I think now, and with the new level of technology, another kind of industrial revolution, and will there be a prophet like John Muir who can wake up all these aspects of technology that are ultimately going to complete our earth? I mean, all the ramifications of it. So I don't know. I mean,
One of the hard parts about being that is that John Muir has to recognize that his very voice is going to bring a lot more people into this space, and those people are going to relatively ruin it, right? And so it could be like my friend who said, I go up and stay with my son, but my son won't let me tell what town I go to stay in because he doesn't want anybody else to find out about it. Right? And we'd like to protect those things, but at the same time, John Muir knew the importance of people coming to those spaces.
But with a different time too.
Yeah,
The population wasn't as bad.
It was,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, we have
yeah.
a population now.
But he thought ahead well enough to be able to say, it is gonna stay a wild place. And it's relatively tame wild space compared to what he knew.
Even the Arctic now is not wild.
That's right.
It's
That's right.
tiny.
That's right.
Pulling up these, ice,
Of course.
of course,
Mhm.
it's full of pollution.
Yeah.
Pollution is everywhere now.
Yeah,
We do have those people now, we have very low test, we have, I'm when yeah. He wrote, Monkey Wrench guy, Edward Abbey. Edward Abbey was a great one for the desert, you know, putting forth the desert stuff. I mean, we do have them now. It's just a matter of knowing where to find.
sure.
And
We did,
can't we be those people?
we can be. We lost someone just a couple years ago that lived right down here in Amato. And she's one of my heroes, Bert Baylor.
Right.
Wrote incredible books celebrating our space. Right? Which is space that would be really easy to just pass by really fast on I-19. Instead of seeing, you know, going on the road up to Amato, which is a challenging road. And seeing what she really saw.
You know, he talks about, we are a bundle of worlds. We are the universe squeezed into human form. I love that. And I have a class at KU Nash I teach called See It, Draw It, and Count It. So we see the mountains, we draw with pastels the mountains, we take on the strength, the stability, the stillness of a mountain as we're creating them. So I think that that is a wonderful thing about creativity and creation, that they go together.
But that again, that's a good example of choosing to. Right? Choosing to stop and see. What could easily be walked right past. You do a good job, Nancy, looking at flowers and zooming in on them, like the flower up here. And taking time to really look at it rather than, you know, I might go, oh, pretty flower. Away I go. Right? And I think that time taking is a good and important thing.
Anybody, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just struck by the fact that a near disaster with his eyesight changed his life. You know, and that he had not gone the pathway he did, had he not had to spend that time in darkness.
Yeah.
And waiting and hoping for the healing to happen. And then he characterizes the eyes of a child. And I've said often, that's why I want to stick with little kids, because they see things I don't see.
They do.
And they point them, they're not hesitant to point that. And I treasure that. But the other thing was, the point about even the dead things are purposeful. You know, the dry grass and that kind of stuff, we see that as a hazard when it's fire season, but it's part of the cycle.
Part of this.
And so even that stuff needs to be honored. The stuff we call refuge.
And the difficulty of that, Judy, is that. So I was up in the White Mountains and the Blue Mountains this last, and we were going on some of these back Forest Service roads, and every once in a while there'd be rocks in the middle of the road. Why? Because we built a rock in the middle of the mountain. I mean, we built a road in the middle of the mountain, and so those rocks are just falling down the mountain like they're supposed to, right? That's part of the way nature works. But we want our road clear.
Too bad. Go out and clear it.
It reminds me of the meme that I saw. It said, the forest doesn't cross the road crosses the forest. Right? And we forget that perspective.
There's been the take on getting closer to the earth and the suggestion of walking barefoot to feel the earth. And I thought, well, now that's true, but where can we really walk on the earth? Because of asphalt and
Yeah.
rocks and
Yeah.
all. And I thought, well, the only place really that you could comfortably walk barefoot is a sandy beach.
And then I got to thinking about Wisconsin and walking in the state park with the leaves falling and very much into what you were saying and going into the Green Bay in the boat or, you know, on the other side of the peninsula, going into Lake Michigan. That, yes, you know, there you can get, you can touch earth. But anyway, all of that kind of is going around in my head this week. And then I thought, thinking about walking in the woods in Wisconsin, that those kinds of thoughts are sacred memory.
They are so good, yeah.
Mm.
Part of the challenge of walking barefoot too, is that we, in wearing shoes as much as what we've done, have made our feet
Yeah,
less able to do that,
sure.
right? I mean, I'm certain that until the time I turned 14 or 15 years old, I had shoes off my feet more often than I had them on my feet. And I mean that literally. I would walk a mile and a half up to school barefoot, put on shoes just as I walked into the school, take them off as soon as I got out of school and walk home, right? But that means that we're relatively unable to walk in the forest because there's too many sharp things that hurt our feet, right? And maybe it takes us having to readapt ourselves and repractice. That's right. Susan, you were going to say something before.
Yeah, I'm thinking about both.
Yeah,
And practice.
yeah, because at least that's a relatively simple place to go.
Grass, grass. Same with parks.
Yeah. Although I gotta tell you that I walked on a golf course this last little while and there was a bear there. Took me a while to figure out it was just metal. It was a statue. But it's a bit dangerous to go out in nature and we're not used to some of that danger, are we? We have to like steel our souls up a little bit, steel our feet up a little bit.
So I was thinking also about Mary Oliver, who's a contemporary poet, and the way she speaks of the earth and how it envelops her, and just, I mean, you can tell in her writing, it just makes me cry.
Yeah.
Every time I read her, and the grasshopper, the one with the grasshopper is, that she's holding in her hand, just grasshopper in this moment, eating sugar, with a jaw on sideways, and said, you know, I mean, she was one who noticed everything.
But I think that's because Mary Oliver has sacredness, like John Muir does, a sacredness about her. That I think it's really easy to lose if we just pass through.
She was
spend hours.
the technology, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
that pulls us away from
Yeah.
our roots.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's time spent doing that rather than with each other, rather than being in nature.
Yeah.
And it's our loss, it's a considerable loss for so many people. And I was thinking, when we were talking about social teaching. Years ago, I was invited to go to Wyoming, and he asked me, I wasn't like a speaker exactly, but he wanted a spiritual aspect to this conference that was going on. And so we talked about it, and I decided to build a medicine wheel out in the field. So beautiful, the Rocky Mountains up there. Built a huge medicine wheel. And one of the activities that I had all these corporate computer chip guys, nerds, but I mean, just dusty men. The ones that live in their, you know, they go to sleep in their suits and ties kind of guys. And one of the things I asked them in the course of this part of the program was, and we actually had several hours to do this, I want you to go out and walk around in this forest, and we had seen a moose that morning, and you know, the wildflowers were out. And I said, I want you to find something in nature that speaks to you. And you have to ask if it can go with you. You know, and I did all these kinds of qualifications. And I actually had several those men cry as they were talking about how they didn't expect that connection to remain and to feel the way they felt about it. But that's the kind of thing we need to wake us back up again.
And I love the point that they made, is that you don't have to stay in nature. But you do have to go there enough that you can bring nature with you. Somehow, whether it's a little token, or more importantly, something that your soul, that's breaking your soul from nature.
If something resonates with you, with your soul, you carry that with you. And it's nice to have a picture if you don't have that, but I think it's even more lovely to feel it inside.
The sad part to me is how many years in our big car makers, you know, they polluted the earth, let's get these big cars in here, and what all they did to destroy. And that's just, you know, they just did so much. That part's sad, that finally we're turning around and we're saying, that's not acceptable. We have to go a different avenue. You know, we only got one earth.
But you know why car makers make big cars? Because we bought,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And so that's what we have to think about all of this. Is it's not just what somebody will do that's bad. It's what we choose to need. You
A
know?
lot of people out there though still who are really seeing this sacred. I love reading, period. The overstories that you go.
Yes.
And he wrote, and then there's books about, you know, the book about fungus. And how that, you know, it's like,
Amazing.
when I was at Photo Apartments, they have all these huge pine trees all over the property. And a pair of great horned owls nested there all the time. Every year the legends come down. I mean, right there in front of your apartment, really there, 3 feet further, literally. And it was, but I'm like, these are big pine trees from the desert. And they had all this grass around with watering it and stuff. But, you know, it's like, if one tree, like we cut down a tree and think nothing of it, but that tree is screaming to the other trees through its underground network. And it's affecting all the trees around it. And, you know, speaking to that, how everything's interconnected and stuff, and we are too. You know, and that's so sacred, is like, we don't recognize how much, like you cut down a tree and how it affects all the other trees, or all the wildlife that's in that tree, all everything around it. You know, it's like thinking of the whole environment and how it all goes together. It's significant.
There's an interesting movie that you should watch. I think it's free on Prime, if you get that, Amazon Prime. It's called The Secret Life of Trees.
It's a really good book too.
It is good. And it talks about that, and it makes us have to, you know, because we see a tree as being just the trunk going up. And we forget, and especially like with aspens, I was in some of the aspen grows up in northern Arizona. You know, those are all one organism. We think they're disconnected because we see them as individual trees, but they are literally one organism. Some people think an aspen forest is the largest organism in the world.
Is it like the coral reef off of Australia? That
Yeah,
that's
that's
all connected?
Yeah. And we just have to remember that some of our definitions aren't the only definition. But to do that, to see trees as connected, we have to take time to think differently. And most of our life these days teaches us to speed up, do things faster, get more efficient. And I'm not trying to say there's not important things about efficiency. I'm trying to say we also need to waste time sometimes. right?
You think it's a waste? I don't think it's a waste.
Well, that could be all, you're right, but you know what I mean, we need to slow down, we need to think of it in a way that's different than what much of our life has taught us.
And part of that is not compartmentalizing and seeing things as separate entities, and that is how most of a lot of minds work.
And even if it's not the one organism of the tree, of several trees connected, the sphere of that environment is connected and connected to each other. You can't just take one animal out of it without knowing what else is going on. We've tried that again and again, you know, as we said, all these wolves, they're mean, we should take them out, and we damaged. And we're learning the importance of the whole of the ecosystem.
Although last night I was walking in the bathroom and came across a scorpion. It was the largest one I've ever seen, but it was dead within seconds. Sorry.
We just have to remind us.
Yeah,
He's done.
last night, we opened the back door here for Anubis to go out and do his duty, and he jumped right on the tarantula.
Oh, oh my gosh.
He was having a good dinner with all the animals that are, you know, floating around our life. And I love tarantulas, but you can't keep them in the yard if Anubis is gonna eat them every time. You know, because that our made up world gets in the way of that wilder world. Right?
Did you do?
I thought, oh, we just pulled him off and we thought that we tossed the tarantula over the fence.
You picked it up with your hand?
No, I mean, they're pretty easy to pick up. They're pretty easy to pick up. But yeah, we used a piece of paper or something. to
Okay.
carry it over.
But not your beard.
But they are pretty tame. They are not hard to pick up.
Right.
But it's all those things like scorpions. They're pretty scary to try to say, do I want to be this close to?
Yeah.
I mean, that's nature.
I constantly remind myself when Halloween is coming, damage my yard. They were here before I was. All of these things we're talking about.
We invaded their space.
That's right.
I think it's one of the attractions of we have in campus. I mean, it takes all of this place where we can try to, but it also has the atmosphere of inviting people into the
Yeah.
desert feel.
Yeah.
Without,
Did I tell you how mad I got at you guys last year? Because you were starting to come back to campus. And so the animals were staying. I mean, I've seen lots of animals when you guys were all staying home. Suddenly you guys started coming back to campus and they kind of retreat a little bit.
Different.
It's a challenge, isn't it? Because, you know, the two worlds can't easily coexist. And yet it's important for us to figure out how they can.
Let me share a story of some friends of mine who live out in the desert, in the Tucson Mountains. And they had a 7-year-old, 8-year-old daughter. And they had lots of scorpions. I mean, enough so that they were gonna have to move. And he happened to be involved with, there was actually a medicine person who lived on the property. And they did a ceremony, which I witnessed, and it was to become friends with the scorpions. And I will tell you, after that, they had no problems with the scorpions. So. I don't really know.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to imagine that, but part of that.
Absolutely.
But part of that is because we told a certain story, right? And you know, anything that you're fearful of, the way to solve that fear is to move towards. And yet we have at least some natural thing that says run away. But that doesn't solve the fear, it just gets you more distance from it. So it's hard to figure out exactly how to do that with all the difference.
I do worry about the children and young adults that are on their screens all the time. and they're not out in the world, the natural world, it seems really abundant. The screen time.
Yeah.
And what it does to their eyes and everything, their soul and their spirit and just their posture. I don't know, I know you all feel the same way, but
But the question that we might ask ourselves is, how do we very intentionally help them to be able to do that?
Don't you find it weird that there's so much more talk about virtual reality? And living in virtual reality, oh, we can visit each other in virtual reality. Well,
the real reality.
whatever happened to the real deal? But I mean, this is what, you know, really tech, Silicon Valley, this is what they're enamored with.
But, and in favor, all of that technology stuff can help us to enter into that stuff. I mean, some ways that we've never seen before. We can take technology and identify a plant, we can learn about it really well.
Yeah.
But it can also just make it so we're moving through. And at least, I wrote down 5 words that I think are, that describe what we can just look at things, or we can see things, or we can observe them, or experience them, or we can feel them. And do we go deeper and deeper? You know, you can't do that every time with every single thing, right? But Muir would go and he talked about just looking and seeing a piece of nature and taking the time with that piece of nature. And so we would go down that list a little deeper. You can't do that with everything, but you can choose when and how you do that at the time. And do we help our kids? Deborah.
Yes. Oh, I was kind of thinking about the AI piece and wondering if we're going to get to a place where that may be our only link to nature, and will it still engender the same things in us AI wise as it does as actually being out there? I mean, if you ever spend any time in AI at all, especially, you know, where you're got the goggles on and all of that, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I just wonder how far we're going to be able to take it to simulate those experiences, and will they engender in our children the same kinds of things that we get when we're out in nature, not AI nature? Will it matter? Will it matter that it's AI and not real?
I think those are good questions for us to ask and answer. Go ahead.
So your subconscious doesn't know whether it's real or not. If you're, you know, whether you got the goggles or not, your subconscious has the experience. It doesn't know. It just believes. You know, you got conscious, you got subconscious. So you can learn a lot. There's a class at the university where the instructor has constructed Harlem that, you know, some historical events in Harlem, and students go to Harlem through virtual reality. And so, I mean, I think that, you know, you can read books about it. I mean, that's good too.
Yeah.
Imagining yourself, but being able to go someplace, in a full experience.
Well,
I think is
Captain Kirk showed us the hologram.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, we've all been lost in space, right? I mean,
But it is that type of thing. All those things can help bring that back to it, and I don't think that's an unimportant thing. Even some of the movies that we've mentioned, those are ways to be able to see something that maybe you wouldn't be able to touch. You know, make you think about something that you haven't thought about before. So I don't want to poo-poo on any kind of technology. You just have to, you know, make sure that you're continually reaching out that way. Joyce.
The one thing they've not been able to accomplish is the sense of smell.
Yeah,
Oh.
So when you're, you know, to be out in the woods, you got that smell.
and the weather.
Yes, exactly, yes.
That whole experience.
And that's evidently something that's going to be extremely difficult to replicate.
The good news is that you can experience a cactus without poking your finger. No, you know what I'm saying, that's part of why we do some of these things, is because it's less dangerous.
Well, and for those of us who aren't rich enough to be able to go to where we see great things, AI would be one way of experiencing it. I don't think technology is necessarily good or evil, it's how we use it.
Yeah.
Like with everything else. You know, I know my grandkids can hike 3 miles, 4, 5, 5, 6. I think, whoops. Yeah, how did it? But, you know, it's like, I don't know how much, like they're, you know, they have their own tablet. But they're doing certain things they do on it, they're very, within my kids are very, like, son and daughter are very exceptional parents. But, you know, it's like, I can see it too for kids who are disabled. You experience things that they wouldn't be able to otherwise.
I think of Avatar, I remember when Jake, who lost his legs, first got to be in his avatar and could feel himself running again for the first time in a long time. I agree that that's a way to be able to bring an experience to somebody different than what they might be able to experience themselves for a number of different reasons. So, I think the important part about all that we're talking about is the word that he used, where it said first soul. Do we do something that puts us in touch with the first soul? Right? And it's really easy not to do that, I guess. But
The difference between being in your head all the time or going to your heart.
yeah,
I say that all the time when I'm walking.
Yeah.
Go from your head, because I'm thinking, and just turn it off.
Yeah,
And go to my heart and just be there.
yeah.
Hard to remember that.
And it can be as simple, you don't even have to go for a walk, you can go out here and look at a plant. And just sit in that space that's not very nature. You know, because it's surrounded by buildings, but there you can find first soul. But you do have to think differently than what typically our life gives us.
We're so lucky to live where we live. You know, I mean, and it's not to be lived with. It's, I mean, more than any place, when I'm out in the desert, that's when I feel connected to the universe.
I was actually meant to the home version. That is just. It was far enough, so.
One of the most heartbreaking things in this whole book was where he talked about how in the 18th century.
Oh, and Chechi?
No, that was heartbreaking
Oh,
too.
yeah.
But the part where he just said there was that in the 1800s or in this, right, we killed off 50% of the forest. And that's mostly eastern forests, right? Where you don't really see forests anymore, you've got all the land that's usable. And you can't get out, I think from the Mississippi East, you can't get out of sight of a building.
I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I'm 23 years old, coming out here, and I didn't realize that towns could end, and then there could be land.
Yeah.
What a concept. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost embarrassed, you know,
Yeah.
but I got it.
And I think it's important that we be able to do that. I stood up on a fire tunnel and looked across hundreds of acres, thousands of acres, without another site of humanity in most of it. And I think that that's a good breath to have every once in a while. And we've done a lot of stuff to make it hard to do that. Including, for example, well, the pavement ends here, I can't go any further. Right, we've gotten scared of non-paved roads, we've gotten scared of unexplored areas. And sometimes we need to be able to, and there's some reasons, if you have a problem walking on unpaved spaces, that's a real challenge to go there, right? But I think there's something about that that helps.
What do you think about, all the light pollution that you can't even see stars anymore here?
It's terrible.
I mean, right here in Tucson.
It's
Forget
terrible. Yeah,
it. You need to get 400 miles out.
I, that's one of the reasons I go to the mountains, to be able to see stars.
I just-
Yeah.
If you go to Palestine, Texas, there's a place called the Dogwood Trails. And it is so neat to be able to go there and see these dogwoods year after year. It's just something that's, once you experience, it, you want to go back and you think, my God, Mother Nature, look at what all we have produced here, you know, and it's beautiful. Because we need trees, trees are essence for oxygen. That's not rocket science. You know, and some people, let's chop them down. No, let's not chop them down. We need them. But I remember going there so much, and a friend of mine lived up near Washington DC, the cherry blossoms. He would go through there and see all those, and it reminded him of being back home, the dogwood, but he was able to see these cherry blossoms, and he loved those. You know, it's just part of our age group that we've been fortunate that we've seen a lot of good things.
That's right. And don't get me wrong, I think that you can have some of the very same feels that we've been talking about in tame nature. Right? You can go to some of the gardens and be able to feel those same type of feels. But we have to be very intentional about those type of spaces if we're going to take away all our wild spaces. Right? I worry a lot about taking away all our wild spaces. And especially taking them away because we send so many people in there that are no longer wild. Right? Like Hetch-Hetchy.
Yeah, right.
That was kind of,
Yeah, I did see those.
Yeah.
Because I've been looking at some.
one of my dreams is to go to Iguazu and fall on. The Paraná River comes from Brazil and comes through the northern part of Argentina and drops over these cliffs, and it's just an amazing fall. Well, let me finish. But just upriver from that, there were these 7 falls that were more magnificent. And guess what? They put them down and covered those. Right?
Wow.
And it's really easy for us to do that type of thing and forget to preserve those wild spaces.
Just gotta stop smelling roses.
One thing that they say there is a $100 Indian reservation.
That it might,
Because
right?
one of my best times was driving in the Navajo reservation and testing those mesas. And it was that same sense of being able to see for miles and nothing. I mean, there were adobe places that they sort of blended in with the landscape, so you were unaware that they were there. And the plant life was trying to take back the road. Along the edges of the road, and wherever there were cracks, the flowers and the grass and all that stuff were coming through, and it's like, okay, it's sort of cheering them on. It was like, oh, what is, I wanted to do is just stop somewhere and spend 6 months watching the light change
See
and
what happens.
the weather change, and couldn't do that because I have a family in the back who were watching the scenery.
So you remind me of what I think is the most profound line in this whole chapter. It says, there will be new beginnings for the earth. She will heal.
Yes,
The question is whether humanity will get to be part of
go
it.
with her.
Will we be able to do what we need to survive?
When do we deserve to be alone?
And then do we deserve it? Right?
And when Kansas going down, which everyone educated too, dams up that area, and it's like now all these cliffs and natural formations are coming back again. Of course, we may not have county, or water, but other than that, you know, it's pretty that's that has not, it's all very convoluted, and we don't want to live here. It's interesting to me about what's gonna happen when we run out of the park. We are, what we when we are out.
Yeah.
And it's like, here it is, you know, it's happening. Big cities, I think that's.
And here's the difficulty of that challenge. It's not because I'm using more water necessarily, although I think each of us use more water today than it used to be. But there's more of us using water in more ways. And so we have to ask water questions in a very different way than what we could have asked 50 and 100 years ago. We have to ask all resource type questions that way. Oil might have been what carried us this far. Is it the right resource to carry us beyond this point? Or are there other ways to be able to do something? We have to start asking questions, not just stubbornly holding on to what used to be true. Los Angeles sucks up a lot of that water. And it's because they were very smart and they bought different ways to be able to suck that up and own that water. And yet they've got millions, trillions of gallons of water right within their doorstep, but they're not doing the technology to try to figure out how to use that water, that seawater. And we have to ask those kinds of questions differently than what it's easier just to keep doing what you've done.
We got a conversation about that last week. And I said, if you desalinate, what is that gonna do to the ocean, and what about all the life in the ocean that's dependent on that salinization? Do we have the right to come up all these species?
Yeah.
I say, no, we don't.
But see, we're doing that same way though, when we just drain rivers.
Right, I'm not for that either.
You know what I'm saying? And so we have to ask all those types of questions. And we have to ask what is replenishable, what is renewable, how do we not just take? And we're really good at taking. We've answered how to take questions really well. We haven't figured out how to get that.
So I just saw a little blurb on Brad Lancaster, who is the guru of water recycling in Tucson and now worldwide. And he says that the amount of water that Tucsonans use is equal to the water that we get raining down on us every year. And if we changed our lifestyles a little bit,
It would be enough.
it would be abundant.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be using.
Yeah.
And he learned this from some guy, I believe in Africa, who developed this whole amazing like Garden of Eden in a wasteland in Africa.
Yeah, I read that story, that was so cool.
Extraordinary, you know, but it's,
Trees and built little.
yeah, I don't know, people do that even around the yard. You know, but it's how much then, the next question is, are we willing to change the lifestyle? And that is like. I'll make all points that we just keep water.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Golf courses are water.
Yeah.
Golf courses aren't as much of a problem.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but at least in some neighborhoods, they're doing these cutouts on the side of the street to let the water. That's from Brad Lancaster. That's inspired from his. He's got a little oasis downtown.
In Delaware Springs, that's where he did all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, the entire, his whole house is designed to be like an orchard. It's all run by water harvesting. And I haven't visited yet, but I've seen all the videos and I'd like to take my class there, but it's really, he's amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
He's
His name is Brad.
Brad Lancaster. Yeah.
So
He's got some books,
We haven't
tons of
tried
videos. Yeah, you can see him on his bike. You know what he looks like. Yeah, big guy. Yeah.
I want to tell you a story about a father and a son. That are kind of in some ways my heroes. The son's name is Joey. Joey was about 3rd grade or so when I started here. And Joey one time, right when we first got into the new building up there, called me over and said, gotta come look at this, there's a cocoon over here. Right, I've been walking past because I got stuff to do, I'm pastoring. Right, Joey says, come see this. That's what I think we have to do, we have to listen to the Joeys in our life. That are telling us to slow down and see something we haven't seen. So Joey's dad now is looking at our stuff and said, how do we use water better here on our campus? What do we do to change our use of water, our flow of water, all of those types of things? I love people that are asking those kinds of questions. Not just for our campus, but in the larger sense too, because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. It's not that any particular use of it is wrong or evil, if we want to call it that. It's that the whole of it isn't sustainable. And we've got to figure out other choices. So we have to listen to the people like Hans that are telling us, think differently. Like Brad that are saying, just making these few changes. So as you hear about stories like that, let's figure out how to implement some of that here on our campus, in our homes and stuff.
It's money.
It-
Sorry, guys. I'm
For-
not saying.
Yeah.
Church can.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I think it takes change of mind to know that.
We should government have better infrastructure to help us. do this.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, and, but see, that infrastructure will come if we choose to demand it.
Yes.
If we choose to say we need these things here, then somehow that will happen.
You really think so with this government?
I
Oh,
think-
they've
have a
been,
bill
okay,
passed.
Sanders has been asking for help, to revamp our whole healthcare system for how many years?
You got some.
I don't, but but some things are changing. What I'm saying is things are changing. We have to keep demanding that they keep changing.
Biden's bill passed.
I think it's a horrible bill. Have you listened to what the Indian tribes, some of the people in the Indian tribes have said? And all the devastation that's gonna happen with, fracking, that's going right through their land and all the water that's gonna be. Right. I think it's a horrible bill, and basically the only reason they got it is because Manchin got what he wanted. He's got unlimited resources for all the coal drilling that he's ever gonna want. You take a look at what that bill really is. It's horrible.
It's who we vote for that makes the
It
difference.
makes a difference, doesn't it?
Elect new people in the government.
We've got, Yeah.
Big change.
so we've gone over time, not very far, but we've gone over time. Thank you for your time. Next week we talk about a man that maybe you here at St. Francis haven't heard of before, and that's Pierre de Chardin. Kind of well known here. Been studying a bit here. It's right here, right by the nose. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
We are going to bring this in this.